Hey, grade eights. We are on the last section of this chapter already. Things go fast when we only have 2 classes a week. And we're going through a section of the chapter each time, but that's what we need to do to finish on time this year. Okay, so we're on integer order of operations. So that's, using BEDMAS. But we're really only using the mass. We won't be, well, and the brackets. We won't really be using exponents that much. Not right now, even though that is part of it. So just a quick review of what our rules are for multiplying and dividing integers. So if you have a positive number, any positive number, and you multiply or divide that number by another positive, the answer is always positive. If you have a negative and you multiply or divide that negative by another negative, the answer is always negative. So you have two negatives. Oops, sorry, I just lied. Ignore that. If you have a negative and you multiply or divide by another negative, you get a positive. So if you have two of the same thing, if you have two positives or two negatives, you always get a positive amount. Okay? If you have a negative and you multiply or divide that by a positive, you are going to get a negative. If you have a positive and you multiply or divide that by a negative, you get a negative. So if you just have one negative, you're going to get a negative. Or for longer equations of just multiplying and dividing, if you have more than, if you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is going to be negative. Okay, so that's our rules for multiplying and dividing. So always for multiplying and dividing, those rules work. For adding and subtracting, we don't have as simple of rules as that. You just have to think, is my amount getting larger or smaller? But we do have the keep, change rule. So if I had -6, or let's just say I had +6 minus -4, I could keep the first one, keep it as +6, change my subtraction to addition, and change my last digit to be the opposite. So it was -4, so now it's +4. So keep, change. And when I do that, I get addition, which is usually a little bit easier, and both are positive, so it's easy to see that that is a +10. So because of keep, change, we say subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. Okay, so hopefully those rules you're sort of starting to get and keep in mind. Let's go to some order of operations questions. So in order of operations, we have to do division, multiplication first, whichever one comes first, going from left to right. So it could be multiplication before division. It could be division before multiplication. In this case, there's only one multiplication. So that's what we got to do first. We got to figure out -7 times by -3. Looking at our rules, negative times negative, that equals a positive. 7 times 3 is 21. That is a positive 21 because it's a negative and a negative. And now I'm going to bring down the rest of my equation to keep it in the same order because that's very important. So I just write the rest of it down and bring everything else down onto this next line. And now it's just addition and subtraction left. So I'm going to start on the left. +4 plus +21. Well, that's +25. Okay, and now I'm going to be subtracting. I bring the rest down, so I'm just doing one step at a time. I'm going to be subtracting +5. And the final answer, 25 minus 5, is 20. There we go. There's our answer. Okay, so it seems like a lot of work, but it's a really safe way to just do one step at a time, connect the two things you're doing with a line, figure that out, and then bring the rest down into the same position. So the +4 was in front, I keep that in front. This +5 is being subtracted on the right, I keep that on the right. Okay, let's do this next one. So this one over here that I'm moving around, has some weird brackets. So the square brackets is just to differentiate from these rounded brackets that just separate the integers. You really got to get used to brackets. Sometimes you will just see another round bracket around these round brackets. And then you just have to sort of figure out what you're looking at and figure out what brackets are for what. And it just takes some practice to get used to that and how math looks, because it doesn't always look the same. So BEDMAS, brackets first. We have to do what's in the brackets, and we go from left to right. So I'm going to do what's in the brackets. I start on the left because there's no multiplication or division. It's just a subtraction and addition. So positive 5 minus positive 6. That's going to bring me down to negative 1. So I get negative 1 here. And I'm going to bring everything else down. So this is still technically in brackets. This 7 gets positive plus negative 7 gets brought down. So I'm adding negative 7. I still haven't completed what's in my brackets, but I'll just keep all of this in mind here. So now I have to do what's left in my brackets. I have a negative 1, and I'm adding a negative 7. So if I have 1 negative and I add 7 negatives, how many negatives do I have? I have 8 negatives. So it's negative 8 is the final answer. So now that I've done everything in those brackets, I don't need them there anymore. I bring this down. So I get negative 16 divided by negative 8. I just think, okay, I'm dividing 16 divided by 8. I know that that is 2. It's a negative and a negative. Gives me a positive when I'm multiplying, dividing. And so there's my final answer. It's positive 2. Okay, so you just do the steps one at a time. Always just working with 2 integers at a time keeps it pretty simple. Let's do a couple more examples. Okay, here's one of those cases where, we have some, the brackets look sort of confusing, and you sort of got to see what they're for. Because, and I purposely did this because sometimes they put these brackets around an integer, right? For these little brackets here, they're not part of the brackets for BEDMAS because there's no operations inside of there. You're not adding or subtracting or dividing or multiplying in there. They're just to show that those negative symbols are not subtraction symbols. But they actually aren't always put around a number. So here we have just a 5. There is no positive or negative symbol. You assume that that's a positive sign. Here you have a negative 2. There isn't a bracket around it. It's out in front, so we're not, we don't have anything on the left side here. Whoa. We don't have anything on the left side here that we're subtracting from it. So that's just a negative sign. You have to sort of, they're not always written the same way. So I'm just showing it this way, and you just have to figure out what we're doing. So we do have brackets in this situation. These are the brackets around an operation. So there's an addition happening in there. I'm just going to go back to black. Skinny lines. Thank you. So in the brackets, we have 5 plus negative 3. So 5 plus negative 3, you could keep change that. That would give you 5 minus positive 3. Well, 5 minus 3, that's a lot easier. That's just 2. So 5 plus negative 3 is positive 2. Okay. I now bring everything else down. I'm just going to put brackets around it just to keep it. And you can add brackets around integers if you'd like, right? Like right at the beginning, if you found it confusing, you could just put any brackets you want around any integers. So I have negative 2 times by what was in my brackets, which is positive 2, plus negative 15 is still on the right side there. So now I have to do the multiplication. Negative 2 times by positive 2 is, 2 times 2 is 4, and it's a negative times by a positive, which gives you a negative. So negative 4, now I'm adding to that negative 15, negative 4, plus negative 15. 4 negatives and 15 negatives is how many negatives? 19 negatives, or negative 19. Okay, and there's my answer. More practice. Okay, if you want, maybe pause for a second, try to solve this problem by yourself right now. See what you get, and then compare it with what I'm about to do. So click pause if you want to. Okay, now I'm going to start. So we have to do what's in brackets first. There's some brackets on the left side here of this addition. So here's my brackets. So it is 8 plus negative 6. That is the same as 8 minus positive 6. Hey, that brings me to positive 2 as well. Oh, just like that last problem. Now I'm just going to rewrite everything so I just have it all on the same line. So I'm dividing by negative 2. I'm subtracting 4 times by negative 3. Okay, so what do I need to do next? Well, I need to do division or multiplication from left to right. So there's some division right here. So positive 2 divided by negative 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. It's a positive and a negative, so the answer is negative. So that's negative 1. And I would have to do the multiplication. I'm just going to do them both on the same step because I have to say that subtraction for last because that's the last operation we do here because we just have division, we have a subtraction, and we have a multiplication. So I can do the division and the multiplication. Let's leave the subtraction for last. So the multiplication, I have 4 times by negative 3. 4 times 3 is 12. That's also a positive and a negative, which gives me then negative 12. So there's my answer, and I am subtracting these. Okay, so I get negative 1, subtract negative 12. A little bit confusing. I could keep, change that. So keep, change. I'd get negative 1 plus positive 12. Okay, so thinking I'm at negative 1, I'm adding 12, so I'm going to get bigger from negative 1. I'm going to go up 12 spaces on my number line. You could draw out your, your 1 negative integer and then your 12 positive integer chips. Well, you'd see that would make 1 0 pair, so it would cancel out the negative and 1 positive. It's going to end up leaving me with 11 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. My answer is positive 11 here. Okay. Okay, so those are straightforward integer operation, order of operations problems. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you're already used to order of operations. Now we're just adding negatives into the mix. Okay, let's do some word problems. So on 4 days in June, resolute, none of it, the daily low temperatures were negative 6 degrees Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius, positive 1, and negative 7 degrees Celsius. That does not sound like 4 nice days in June, but it is none of it. What was the mean? Now this is a word you need to remember from grade 7. The mean daily low temperature for those 4 days. So what does mean mean? You have to remember that the mean is, anyone? Average, good. So the mean is your average. So how do you find an average? You add up all numbers. And then you divide by how many numbers you have. To find the average or the mean of them all. So how many numbers you have. How many numbers you added together. Okay? So if we want to find the mean, we need to add up each of these numbers. So it's going to be negative 6 is 1, plus 0, plus positive 1, plus negative 7. Okay? Now the answer to that, we're going to divide by how many numbers we have. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. So we're going to be dividing this by 4. Now if I just wrote this down, then I wrote divide by 4. Is that a proper equation? Well, not really, because actually what this is saying, if you follow order of operations, you would actually just have to do 7 divided by 4 first. But we don't want to do 7 divided by 4. We want to do the answer of all of the addition. That answer, that sum, we want to divide by 4. And so to show that we need to do all of that addition first, we can put an extra set of brackets around those integers. And now here's an expression that we can use to solve for what the average daily low temperature was those 4 days. So let's find out what was in the brackets. Negative 6 plus 0. Well, 0 doesn't change anything, so it's still negative 6. Plus positive 1 brings us up to negative 5. Plus negative 7 makes it negative 12. So we're at negative 12 degrees Celsius. When you add them all together, but that is split among the 4 days. And so the average temperature of each of those days is 12 divided by 4 is 3. It's a negative and a positive because there was 4 days. It's a positive amount. So the answer is negative. Negative 3 degrees Celsius is the mean low temperature. Okay, so you're going to see in some questions in the textbook and, tests and just in your future, questions about the mean. Remember that the mean is the average. You add up all the numbers that you have that you're finding the mean or the average for, and then you divide by how many numbers you have. Okay, next question. A freezer is at room temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. When the freezer is turned on, it drops by 4 degrees Celsius per hour. How long does it take the freezer to reach negative 12 degrees Celsius? So one thing you're going to be asked when you see some word problems is to write a single expression. Because lots of you could probably figure this out in steps, and you may be able to, I'm actually just going to say, just pause it right now, see if you can figure out how many hours it would take by yourself in whatever method you have for the freezer to go from 20 degrees Celsius to negative 12 degrees Celsius when it's dropping by 4 degrees Celsius per hour. See if you can solve that. But then we're going to look at how we can write an expression for it. Okay, you're back because you paused it. Yay. So we're going to write our single expression. Now let's just really think about what we're dealing here. Our freezer was at 20 degrees Celsius. It is going to be dropping, if you can imagine a thermometer, dropping all the way down to negative 12 degrees Celsius. Negative 12 degrees Celsius. Okay, and it's dropping by 4 degrees Celsius per hour. So 4 degrees Celsius every hour, it's going down. 4 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius. And for every 4 degrees Celsius that it's dropping, that's 1 hour. So 1 hour, this would be another 1 hour. This will be another 1 hour. So after 3 hours, it would have dropped 12 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we're figuring out, well, how much is it going to be dropping? And how many of these 4 degrees Celsius drops are there in this amount? So if we wanted to write one expression, one thing you could do is figure out, well, how many degrees difference is there between positive 20 degrees Celsius and negative 12? What is the difference? How many degrees are in there? Okay, and you can do that. You can show that by subtraction. So if you have positive 12 or positive 20 degrees Celsius, and you subtract negative 12, that would show you the difference between 20 and 12 degrees Celsius. Okay? And maybe, actually, sorry, I'll just do that. Let's just solve this in steps first, and then we'll look at writing a single expression using that order of operations. Sorry. Okay, so 20 minus 12. So if I keep change it, that's 20 plus 12. I'm subtracting a negative. It's the same as adding a positive. So that's 20 plus 12. So there's a 32 degree, that equals 32 degrees Celsius. That means that there's a 32 degree difference, right? From 20 degrees Celsius to negative 12, there's 32 degrees in between there. Well, if it's dropping 4 degrees Celsius every hour, how many hours would it take to drop 32 degrees? Well, we could divide 32 by 4, because 4 degrees Celsius each hour, and that would tell us how many hours it took to drop 32 degrees Celsius. So 32 divided by 4. Hopefully you remember your multiplication tables. Well, 8 times 4 is 32. So, okay, that's 8. So it'd be 8 hours. Because 4 degrees Celsius fits into 32 8 times. And so it would take 8 drops of 4 degrees Celsius. 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 drops of 4 degrees Celsius to reach, each one of those drops being 4 degrees Celsius to reach negative 12. Okay? So we did this in a couple steps, but how could we write this as an expression that we could use to solve the problem? Well, we did this subtraction. Okay, so this is subtraction is what we did first, and then we divided. So if we want to show subtraction being done first in an equation, we have to put it in brackets. So I would do, those square brackets or whatever. I had positive 20 minus negative 12. I did that first, and then I divided that by 4. Okay? And that was our equation. That was what we did in one expression. So instead of doing one thing, doing one step, doing the subtraction or addition, and then having an equal sign, and then doing the division, we could show it in one expression by using these brackets to show what we want to do first. And when you solve this, you still get the 8 hours that it takes for that freezer to cool down if it's cooling down by 4 degrees Celsius every hour. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. This is a bit of a tough question. Finding these single expressions from word problems is a bit of a challenge, and it's pretty tough sometimes. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. I will be available for that on Thursday morning, and I will talk to you later.